After 16 years of marriage, Rachel suggests a break, but is it really a break? Her husband uncovers a betrayal that flips their entire life upside down. This weekend began like any other in Dallas, Texas. On Saturday, Ethan woke up a little later than usual. He stretched, blinked against the morning light, and leaned over to give his wife of 16 years, Rachel, a soft morning kiss. Rachel grumbled, "Ethan, let me sleep. It feels like I can't catch a break either at night or in the morning." He chuckled, pulling back. "The kids are probably awake by now," Rachel added. "You're right," Ethan replied, "but they're older now. They won't come storming into the bedroom like they used to." Ethan got out of bed, wrapped himself in his robe, and headed to the bathroom. On his way, he heard giggling and footsteps coming from their eldest daughter, Mia's, room. He peeked inside and realized that Lily, her younger sister, was trying to pull her out of bed. He smiled to himself and decided to leave them to it. After freshening up, Ethan dressed and walked to the kitchen. By the time he arrived, Mia and Lily were already sitting at the table, their faces set in expectant expressions. "Are we having breakfast today?" Mia asked with a smirk. "We're hungry. Don't forget we still have school, right?" Lily added, exaggerating her concern. Ethan laughed and shook his head. "School? You're on winter break. You're going to Grandma's house today, remember?" Mia frowned, "And what about you? You're off work for the weekend, right?" Ethan smiled and nodded. "Yep, but your mom's in charge of plans today." Lily sighed. "We could make breakfast ourselves, but Mom doesn't trust us with the kitchen. She says we'll burn everything." Ethan teased, "How about oatmeal or some porridge?" "Your choice." "Oatmeal, please," Mia said with a grin. Ethan smiled and said, "Oatmeal it is. But make sure to wash your faces and brush your teeth. Breakfast will be ready in 15 minutes. As Ethan prepared breakfast, Rachel came into the kitchen, her hair neatly tied back. After all these years, Ethan still admired her beauty. She looked just as radiant as when they first met, though a hint of exhaustion now softened her features. Rachel sat down at the table. "Finish up, girls, and get ready. Your dad is taking you to Grandma's." Mia frowned again. "Mom, you promised we'd go to the Snow Ridge ski resort this weekend. We've been preparing for it." Rachel hesitated before answering, "Plans have changed. We'll go during spring break." Ethan felt uneasy as he flipped pancakes on the stove. Something about the sudden change of plans bothered him. The past few months had been strange, ever since Rachel started working under her new boss, James. They had known each other in college, but Rachel rarely mentioned him. It was as though a new distance had formed between them, and Ethan couldn't ignore it any longer. He trusted his wife, but doubts had been creeping in lately. Could this trip to her mom's house be an excuse to spend time with James? Ethan had a feeling something wasn't right. That morning, after breakfast, Ethan discreetly slipped a small voice recorder into his jacket pocket. He wasn't proud of his decision, but he needed to know what was really going on. After breakfast, Ethan went to the bathroom, switched on the voice recorder, and returned to the kitchen. Rachel was sitting quietly, her eyes distant. Finally, she broke the silence. "Ethan, we need to talk." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He knew this conversation was coming, but he wasn't sure he was ready for it. "What's going on, Rachel?" She offered a small smile before her expression grew serious. "You know I love you, right? We've had a great life together, but I've been thinking a lot lately. I don't want us to drift apart." Ethan furrowed his brow, confused. "Rachel, what are you trying to say?" Rachel took a deep breath. "I've been reading about how couples lose touch with each other over time. I don't want that to happen to us. I think we should be proactive, maybe even see a counselor before things get worse." Ethan's heart raced as Rachel continued. "I've been considering this for a while, and I think we need a break from our marriage. Just a little time apart to focus on ourselves, maybe explore new experiences. That way, when we come back together, we'll have a fresh perspective. Ethan stared at her, stunned. How long are you talking about? A week? A month? Rachel shook her head. No, nothing drastic. I was thinking just for the upcoming holiday weekend. The girls will be with my mom, and we could take this time to breathe. Ethan's jaw clenched. So that's why you're sending them to your mom's instead of the ski trip we planned? Rachel avoided his gaze. We could have sent them to your parents, but I already made arrangements with my mom. The pieces started to come together in Ethan's mind. Let me guess, James is a part of these new experiences you want to explore. Rachel's eyes widened, and she quickly replied, Ethan, don't be ridiculous. There's nothing going on with James. But Ethan could feel the weight of his suspicions growing. You expect me to believe that? You're suggesting a break right after your boss, who, by the way, you dated back in college, re-enters your life. You never even mentioned that he's your boss now. Rachel sighed, clearly frustrated. James has nothing to do with this. This is about us, about giving each other space to grow. Ethan's voice turned cold. Space? Is that what you call this? You've changed, Rachel. Everything about you, your attitude toward me, toward the kids, it's all different now. Rachel softened her tone. Ethan, I love you. I'm not sure what you think is happening, but divorce isn't on the table. I just think this break could help us reconnect. Ethan narrowed his eyes. And what am I supposed to tell Mia and Lily? That mom's taking a break from our family? Rachel shook her head. It's not like that. We don't need to drag the kids into this. Rachel, this plan of yours is reckless, Ethan said, his voice tinged with bitterness. You want to explore and put our marriage on hold. I can't be a part of this. Rachel sighed. Fine. Let's pause the conversation until later. Just drop the girls off at my mom's and come back. We'll figure things out. No, Ethan replied firmly. There's nothing to figure out. I'm leaving. Rachel's eyes filled with alarm. You can't just walk away, Ethan. I can, and I will, Ethan said, his voice cold and resolute. I'm not playing along with this ridiculous plan. But we'll talk when you get back, Rachel pleaded. You enjoy your weekend, Rachel, Ethan said as he grabbed his jacket and bag. I'll be busy driving the girls to their ski trip while you do whatever it is you need to do. Just then, Mia appeared at the kitchen door. Dad, we're ready to go. I'll be ready in a few minutes, Ethan replied, giving Rachel one last look before heading upstairs to gather his things. As the car engine warmed up and the girls settled in the back seat, Ethan pulled out of the driveway. Rachel stood at the window, watching them drive off, her expression unreadable. The car ride was quiet for a while, until Mia finally spoke. Dad, Grandma's house is the other way. Ethan smiled gently. I know, sweetheart. But we're going to the Snow Ridge ski resort instead. You both deserve the trip we promised. Mia exchanged a glance with Lily. Dad, are you and Mom getting a divorce? Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. Why would you say that? We overheard you and Mom arguing this morning, Mia said. And we're on your side, Dad. Right, Lily? Lily nodded silently. Yeah, we're with you, Dad. But what's going to happen? Where are we going to live? Ethan exhaled slowly. We're going to stay at Grandma's for a bit, okay? I'll pick up the rest of your things from home later. Let's just focus on having a great vacation for now. We'll figure out the rest afterward. Back at home, Rachel watched Ethan's car disappear down the street before taking a deep breath. She pulled out her phone and quickly dialed James. He answered after the first ring. Hey, Rachel. Is everything okay? There's a problem, Rachel whispered, glancing around as if someone could overhear her. Ethan didn't take it the way we expected. He knows something's up. What do you mean? James asked, sounding concerned. I brought up the break we talked about, but he's suspicious. He's on to us, he even mentioned you by name. James sighed heavily. That's not good. If he finds out about us, it could cause a mess at work, not to mention what Kira would do if she found out. I'm not interested in causing any more drama than necessary. I'm not trying to divorce Ethan, Rachel said firmly. But things are spiraling out of control. I don't know what to do. James hesitated. What now? Where is he? He's taking the girls to the ski resort. He'll probably be back later today or tomorrow. Okay, James said thoughtfully. When he gets back, try to defuse the situation. Just stick to our plan, no separation, no break. Let his anger cool down, and make sure this doesn't blow up at work. Rachel hung up, feeling slightly more reassured after the conversation. She knew things had escalated far more than she expected, but James had a point. She needed to keep a lid on the situation before it exploded. After all, she had never intended for things to go this far with James. It was just supposed to be a harmless flirtation, something to make her feel alive again. But now, everything was falling apart. In an attempt to distract herself, Rachel decided to pick up some takeout for dinner. After returning, she set the table with 2 glasses and opened a bottle of wine, hoping it would help smooth things over when Ethan returned. She sat in the living room, absently flipping through the channels, her mind racing through the events of the day. The weight of her affair with James and the growing tension with Ethan was becoming unbearable. Meanwhile, Ethan was driving the girls through the winding roads toward the Snow Ridge ski resort. As they drove through the picturesque winter scenery, Ethan made a phone call to his old friend, Chris, who worked as the manager at the ski resort. Hey, Chris. It's Ethan. I've got a favor to ask. Chris, always quick to help a friend, responded, anything for you, man. What's up? Look, things are a little crazy at home, and I need a place to stay with the girls for a few days. Can you set us up with a cabin? Chris didn't hesitate. Of course. I'll arrange something quiet and private for you. Anything else you need? Actually, yeah, Ethan added. I'd prefer if no one knew we were here, especially if someone calls looking for us. I need to keep things under the radar for a bit. Got it, Chris replied. I'll make sure your reservation stays off the books. We've got a few extra cabins, so you'll be comfortable. I'll set one up for you. When will you get here? In about an hour. The roads are a little icy, so I'm taking it slow, Ethan said, glancing in the rearview mirror at his daughters, who were quietly talking in the back seat. When they arrived at Snow Ridge Ski Resort, Ethan checked in at the front desk and was directed to Cabin 14, a cozy retreat nestled at the edge of the resort's property. The girls were thrilled as they unpacked their things, and despite the tension from the morning's events, they were excited for the adventure. Chris greeted them as they entered the cabin. Hey, guys. Glad you made it. Everything set up for you. Let me know if you need anything else. Thanks, Chris, Ethan said, shaking his hand. I appreciate it. As Mia and Lily explored their new surroundings, Chris turned to Ethan and said in a low voice, You want to talk about what's really going on? Ethan hesitated before finally nodding. Yeah, but let's wait until the girls are busy. I don't want them overhearing this. Later that evening, after the girls had headed out for a small dance party happening at the resort's mountain hall, Ethan sat down with Chris in the cabin's living room. They poured a couple of drinks, and Ethan finally opened up. It's Rachel. Things have been off between us for a while now. She's been different ever since she started working with her new boss, James, the guy she used to date in college. Chris raised an eyebrow. That sounds messy. You think something's going on between them? I know it is, Ethan admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. It's not just a feeling. Rachel suggested we take a break in our marriage, and she's been hiding things from me. I just don't know how far it's gone. Chris leaned back in his chair. Man, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you think you'll go through with a divorce? Ethan sighed. At this point, I don't see another way. She's been emotionally checked out for months, and I don't want the girls to see us pretending everything's fine when it's not. Chris nodded sympathetically. It's a tough situation. You deserve better than this. What's your next move? I've already spoken to a lawyer, Ethan said. They're coming up tomorrow to help me figure out the legal stuff. But I didn't want to tell the girls yet. I'm hoping we can enjoy this weekend before everything comes crashing down. Chris placed a hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens, I've got your back. You and the girls will always have a place here. Later that evening, Mia and Lily returned from the dance at Mountain Hall, giggling and full of energy. They were escorted back to the cabin by a resort staff member who offered them hot cocoa. Ethan smiled at how excited they were as they told him about the dance, their faces glowing with joy. Dad, it was so fun. Mia exclaimed. Lily chimed in, we didn't expect to have such a good time, especially since we didn't even pack fancy clothes. But everyone was super nice, and they didn't care what we were wearing. Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of relief. I'm glad you both had fun. Why don't you wash up and get ready for bed? We've got a big day of skiing tomorrow. As the girls headed upstairs to their rooms, Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened earlier. He poured himself a glass of water and sat by the window, staring out at the snow-covered trees. The peaceful landscape was a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the recorder he had used that morning. Taking a deep breath, Ethan pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the quiet room, and every word confirmed his worst fears. Her hesitation, her vague talk about exploring their relationship, the mention of James, it was all there. Ethan's suspicions were no longer just paranoia, they were rooted in the truth. He clenched his fist, feeling both anger and sadness. This marriage was over. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of knocking at the door. Come in, he called, and Mia and Lily burst into the room, still full of energy from the previous night. Dad, wake up. Let's go skiing. Mia said, bouncing on her toes. Lily added, and there's ice skating, too. Can we go later? Ethan smiled. Of course. Let's have breakfast first, and then we'll hit the slopes. After breakfast in the resort's cozy mountain cafe, they rented skis and made their way to the lift. The day was spent skiing through the powdery snow, with laughter and smiles from the girls. For a moment, Ethan was able to forget about the storm brewing in his personal life. As they raced down the slopes, he felt like a dad again, just enjoying time with his kids. By lunchtime, they were back in the cafe, their cheeks flushed from the cold, eagerly devouring their meals. As they finished, they ran into Chris and his wife, Emily, who were also out enjoying the day. Hey, you guys. Emily said warmly. We've been looking for you. How's the skiing going? Great. Mia said. Dad's been teaching us some cool tricks, too. After some casual conversation, Chris leaned in and said quietly to Ethan, the lawyer has arrived. We'll meet in my office later this afternoon. My wife and her sister can take the girls ice skating while we talk. That sounds perfect, Ethan replied. The girls have been wanting to skate, and I could use a break from skiing. Later that afternoon, as Mia and Lily laced up their skates with Emily and her sister, Ethan made his way to Chris's office in the resort's administrative building. There, he was greeted by Maria, a no-nonsense lawyer who had already been briefed on the situation. All right, Ethan, Maria began, laying out papers across the table. We'll go through the details of the divorce filing and child custody arrangements. I've reviewed everything you've told me so far. It's clear this isn't going to be an easy case, but we have solid ground to stand on. What we need to focus on is ensuring your daughter's well-being and securing custody. Ethan nodded as he listened, feeling both anxious and relieved that the process was finally moving forward. One thing I'd advise, Maria continued, is to avoid making any rash decisions about the house or the apartment. Keep in mind that Mia and Lily will grow up and eventually need their own space. If you move into the apartment now and Rachel remarries, it could complicate things in the future. Ethan sighed. I can't even imagine living in the same apartment as her anymore. Think about proposing a petition first, Maria suggested. You can explain that you're filing for divorce and outline the terms. It's better to have everything in writing when you approach her. When will the paperwork be ready? Ethan asked, trying to stay focused. I'll have everything finalized later tonight. You can print it in the morning. In the meantime, I'll be available for any questions you have, Maria said, organizing the documents into neat piles. And Ethan, don't rush this process. We want to make sure everything is done properly for the sake of your daughters. Ethan nodded. I appreciate your help, Maria. After their meeting, Ethan returned to the ice rink to find Mia and Lily gliding across the ice with huge smiles on their faces. They waved excitedly when they saw him, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal again. That evening, after a light dinner at Mountain Lodge, the girls asked if they could go to the dance party again. Ethan agreed, grateful that they had something to look forward to. As they left with Chris's wife, Ethan stayed behind, trying to process everything that had happened over the past few days. Later that night, after the girls returned from the dance, exhausted but happy, Ethan helped them settle into bed. He found himself unable to sleep, his mind racing with thoughts of the looming divorce, his daughter's future, and what Rachel's next move might be. He sat in the quiet cabin, thinking about everything that had led up to this point. Pulling out the recorder again, he played Rachel's voice one more time. Every word confirmed that their relationship had changed beyond repair. It wasn't just James, it was the entire shift in how Rachel saw their marriage, how distant they'd become. The next day was New Year's Eve, and the resort was buzzing with excitement for the evening's celebrations. The girls were eager to join the festivities, and despite everything, Ethan wanted to give them a memorable night. As they prepared for the big celebration in Snowridge Lodge's Grand Hall, Ethan received a text from Maria, the lawyer. Everything is ready. I'll bring the paperwork to you later today so we can go over it before filing. Ethan replied with a quick, thanks, but his thoughts were already consumed with what the next steps would look like. How would he explain this to Mia and Lily? Would they understand? The weight of the situation was heavy, but he knew it was the right decision. That evening, the New Year's Eve party was in full swing. The grand hall was decked out in festive lights, a large dance floor at the center, and tables filled with food and drinks lined the walls. Mia and Lily were ecstatic, twirling around the dance floor with their new friends, while Ethan watched from the side, sipping on a drink. Chris joined him at the edge of the dance floor, nudging him with a grin. Let's try to enjoy the night, man. It's New Year's Eve. Take your mind off things for a bit. Ethan forced a smile. I'm trying. The girls are having fun, at least. Speaking of, Chris said, I talked to Maria. She'll meet us tomorrow morning at the cabin to finalize the papers. It's all set. Ethan nodded. I'm ready. I've thought it through, and I can't keep living like this. Rachel's not the same person anymore. I get it, Chris said sympathetically. But tonight, just focus on your daughters. You've got a lot of good things going for you. As the countdown to midnight began, Ethan pulled his daughters close. They giggled, full of excitement as the room filled with cheers. The new year arrived with fireworks outside the lodge, and for a few moments, everything felt right. Mia and Lily were by his side, and for that brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to enjoy the celebration. But the next morning brought reality crashing back. Maria arrived early, as promised, with the finalized divorce papers. They sat around the cabin's small kitchen table, going over each section. Custody of the girls, the division of assets, and the timeline for court proceedings, all meticulously laid out. "You're ready to file," Maria said, sliding the papers across the table for Ethan to sign. "Once this is filed, the court will move things along." "Have you told Rachel yet?" Ethan sighed. "Not yet. I'm going to tell her today when we get back. I didn't want to ruin the trip for the girls." Maria nodded. "That's probably for the best. It's not going to be an easy conversation, but it's better to get it over with." After signing the papers, Ethan took a deep breath. The weight of the decision settled in, but this time, it felt like the right choice. The girls were still sleeping upstairs, unaware of the massive changes that awaited them. On their drive back to Dallas, Ethan was quieter than usual. Mia noticed and asked, "Dad, is everything okay? You've been really quiet today." Ethan smiled faintly. "Everything's fine, honey. Just a lot on my mind." As they pulled into the driveway of their home, Ethan prepared himself for the conversation with Rachel. The girls went inside, excited to unpack and settle back into their rooms, while Ethan stood by the car for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Rachel was already waiting in the kitchen when he walked in. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You're back." "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We need to talk." Rachel's face grew tense, sensing the seriousness of his tone. "About what?" "I've made a decision," Ethan said, his words clear and deliberate. "I'm filing for divorce." Rachel's eyes widened in shock. "Ethan, you can't be serious. We can work this out." "I was just talking about taking a break, not ending things." Ethan shook his head. "It's too late for that, Rachel. You've been distant for months. I know about James, and I know you've been emotionally checked out of this marriage for a long time." Rachel tried to protest. "It wasn't like that. James and we didn't." "I don't care about the details anymore," Ethan interrupted. "I'm done living in limbo, wondering if my marriage is real or just a convenient lie. I need to move on, and so do you." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but Ethan remained firm. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. The papers are ready. We'll figure out custody of the girls, and you'll have time with them, but this marriage is over." Rachel sat down at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. "I never wanted this. I never wanted it to end like this." Ethan's voice softened slightly, but he didn't back down. "Neither did I. But sometimes, things end whether we want them to or not." Rachel remained at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she processed Ethan's words. The silence between them stretched on, but Ethan felt no need to fill it. He had said all that needed to be said. The decision was final. After a few moments, Rachel finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "What about the girls? How are we going to explain this to them?" Ethan took a deep breath. "We'll sit them down together and tell them. They've already noticed the tension between us. They deserve to hear the truth, and we'll make sure they understand that none of this is their fault." Rachel nodded, wiping away a tear. "When?" "Tomorrow," Ethan replied. "Tonight, let's just give them one last normal evening." The weight of his words hung in the air. Rachel stood up from the table, looking smaller than Ethan had ever seen her. "I'll be in the bedroom," she said quietly before walking away. That evening, Ethan sat with Mia and Lily in the living room, the TV playing softly in the background. The girls chatted about their ski trip, still excited about the memories they'd made. Ethan smiled as he listened, trying to savor this last moment of normalcy. But beneath the surface, the reality of what was coming gnawed at him. He knew the conversation tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, Ethan and Rachel sat down with Mia and Lily at the dining table. The girls sensed something serious was happening, their faces turning solemn. "What's going on, Dad?" Mia asked, her voice hesitant. Ethan exchanged a glance with Rachel, who nodded slightly, signaling that he should begin. "Mia, Lily, there's something important we need to talk about. Your mom and we've decided to get a divorce." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and the girls' reactions were immediate. Mia's eyes filled with tears, and Lily's face scrunched up in confusion. "But why?" Lily asked, her voice cracking. "Is it because of us?" Ethan quickly shook his head. "No, sweetheart. This has nothing to do with you. Your mom and we've been having problems for a while now. Sometimes, even when two people love each other, they can't make things work anymore." Mia wiped her eyes, her voice shaking. "Are you and Mom going to live in different houses?" "Yes," Rachel said softly. "But no matter what, we'll always be here for you. You'll still see both of us, and we'll work together to make sure everything stays as normal as possible." Lily looked between her parents, struggling to understand. "But I don't want you to get divorced. Can't you try harder?" Ethan's heart ached at her words. "We have tried, Lily. But sometimes, trying isn't enough." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Rachel worked through the logistics of their separation. Ethan moved into the guest bedroom while they figured out the details of who would live where and when the formal separation would happen. One day, Rachel pulled Ethan aside. "I've been thinking about what's best for the girls," she said quietly. "I think it's best if I move out of the house. You should stay here with them. I don't want to disrupt their lives any more than we already have." Ethan was surprised but nodded in agreement. "If you think that's best." "I do," Rachel said, her voice resolute. "I'll find a place nearby so I can still see them often." Weeks later, Rachel packed up her things and moved out of the family home. Ethan helped her carry the last box to her car, both of them avoiding eye contact as they navigated the awkwardness of the moment. Rachel paused before getting into the driver's seat, looking back at the house one last time. "I never thought this would be our story, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with regret. "Neither did I," Ethan replied softly. "But we're doing what's right for the girls." Rachel nodded, and without another word, she got into her car and drove away. Ethan stood in the driveway for a long moment after she left, letting the reality of the situation sink in. The house was quiet now, almost eerily so. The girls were still at school, and the silence felt heavy. But despite the weight of the moment, Ethan felt a strange sense of relief. The uncertainty was gone. He knew what his life looked like now, and though it wasn't the life he had envisioned, it was something he could build from. He went inside and sat at the kitchen table, where the divorce papers still lay. They had been filed, the process had begun, and there was no turning back. But Ethan knew he had made the right decision. Later that day, when the girls returned from school, Ethan met them at the door with a smile. "How about we make some hot chocolate and watch a movie tonight?" The girls' faces lit up at the idea. "Can we watch that new superhero movie?" Mia asked, already excited. "Of course," Ethan replied. "Go get comfy, and I'll make the hot chocolate." As the girls ran off to get changed, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for it. He had his daughters, and that was enough. Epilogue. Months later, Ethan found himself settling into his new routine as a single father. He and the girls had grown even closer through the process, and though the transition hadn't been easy, they had managed to make it through together. Ethan still allowed Rachel to visit the girls regularly, and their interactions remained civil, if not warm. They had both moved on in their own ways, but the connection between them as co-parents remained. During one of their yearly trips to Snowridge Ski Resort, Ethan's old friend Chris introduced him to his sister-in-law, Catherine. Over time, Ethan and Catherine began to develop a relationship, though Ethan was in no rush to make any big commitments. For now, his focus remained on Mia and Lily, who were growing up faster than he had ever expected. Rachel, meanwhile, had moved into a small apartment nearby. After a difficult year following the divorce, she began dating again, finding companionship with a kind widower who lived a few blocks away. Though the pain of the past still lingered, Ethan knew that he had made the right choices. He and Rachel were no longer the same people they once were, but they had both found new paths forward. And as for Ethan, his path led him back to the two people who mattered most, his daughters. No matter what else changed, they would always be the center of his world.